Hello, and welcome to Brilliant Minds. We are actual therapists talking about actual things, but we aren't your therapist, so take everything with a grain of salt. I'm Andrea, and this is.
Olivia. And thank goodness we're not your therapist. I'm just kidding.
I'm just trying to, spice up the disclaimer a little bit this time.
No, I like it because you got to keep it fresh and new and exciting. I
Yeah,
like it. It's all good.
exactly. I feel like it also ties in a little bit to what we're talking about today, which is ADHD, because as soon as I started saying the disclaimer, the script went out of my brain and into a garbage can. So,
Yeah, that's very real. Yeah. We've got some feedback about kind of just more like this idea of how did we know for ourselves that we have ADHD, and then also maybe just more generally we could talk about things that we look for, things that we recognize as part of the like ADHD experience.
we both know that ADHD is something that is like so prevalent in our lives, not just as therapists, but as
A
individuals, as a
person,
parent, as
yes.
yeah, as all these things. So I'm excited about talking about this. It's something that I could probably talk about for hours on end. So
Oh,
hopefully we'll
yeah.
keep it short.
Probably won't, but we could try our best. Okay, so I actually, when I was thinking about this and like my own story about how I came to find out I had ADHD, I kind of actually realized that I don't really know how you came to find out you have ADHD. I just have always accepted that you do.
Fair.
So I really want to know now.
Okay. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if there was like a moment necessarily, or like I don't technically have an official diagnosis. And the reason for that with me is like I am not at a phase in my life where I want to pursue medication. So I don't have that medical diagnosis of an ADHD person or whatever it is. But I have therapist diagnoses of ADHD. So, and mine kind of came about after working with so many individuals with ADHD and autistic individuals where I was like, hold the phone. It just like kept happening. And read this book. I read this book for a client. I read Your Brain's Not Broken. Have you read this before?
We covered in like the last
Oh, yeah,
podcast
you
that
did
I don't
read.
read books, so no. I'm not.
Fair, fair. I read this. It's actually fairly short, and I recommend a lot of my reading able clients to read it because it's really easy to read. It's light, but I read it and I just like within the first chapter started to cry. And I was
Mm.
like, "Oh my god, I feel seen." Like all of this is an experience that I have, and after working with so many clients, I was like, "Wait a second. Hold on." And I brought it up to one of my old therapists and she was like, I don't really have a ton of ADHD experience, and so I can't necessarily like say for sure. She just wasn't confident. And then we walked through the DSM, and like after like the first like two things, she was like, yeah, you probably do. And then I brought it to another therapist after that, and they were like, well, yeah, you have. I thought you knew that from the beginning. I thought you were already diagnosed with that. So that's. And then I went to that ADHD training, the like neurodivergent affirming therapist training that we all in Washington, well, not everyone, but a large portion of us in Washington have been to. Same type of thing. Within an hour of B talking, I was like in tears. I was like, oh shoot, my life is all coming together.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so because I came to the diagnosis even later in my career than you did. What was your experience like being in the field and like not recognizing this piece of yourself for a little bit?
I mean, I think there was always a little part of me that was like, you know, there might be a thing going on. My brother got tested for ADHD and autism as like a kid, and so I think that was always something in the back of my mind. Um, but I never had any issues with that classically, you know what I mean, or stereotypically. So it just never came up. But when I was working with clients, it just felt so natural to talk about ADHD because I was like
Mm.
realizing I was talking about myself in a lot of ways, which sounds really selfish of me. But working with ADHD clients just felt right. And then whenever I had a neurodominant or a neurotypical client, I was like, this isn't clicking. Like this isn't working. And I don't think I realized it then, though, like as it was happening. But looking back, I was like, all these clients that didn't vibe with me or like weren't my type of client, like weren't my ideal client, were probably neurodominants or neurotypicals or just like a different flavor.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I came to it later in life as well, and I think there's a big piece of me that feels as though if I hadn't become a parent or a mom, I probably would have never realized that I have ADHD. And you and I both know and recognize how many people come to this diagnosis later on in life. And it's usually later on in life because the ways in which we've compensated and coped and learned to manage our own experience and others, that comes to an end essentially. And so I became a mom and was like, why is it not easier for me? Like, why can't I change these different things about myself or the way I operate? I felt so powerless to be able to understand or control my own experience. And I think we have talked about this before, but I started the initial therapist pipeline. We'll have to come up with a name for this, which is I start with thinking I have anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize later on you have ADHD
Mm-hmm.
and you really don't have anxiety. And then after you get the ADHD better understood and managed and supported, then you're like, am I autistic? Like
Vibes.
this is the pipeline, right? So I
Yeah.
started with like, okay, I'm restless. I can never relax. I always feel on the go. I assumed, even with all of my experience that I had been in the field at this point, gosh, 4.5, 5 years. Knew people that were ADHD, had worked a little bit with it, not a ton, a little bit with it. Never felt like that was my experience. And so I was like, it must be anxiety. Like, I don't feel anxious, but like internally, I have so much physical energy that I can't figure out how to like disperse outside of me. And yeah, I was working with a therapist, and eventually I was like, yo, I don't think this is anxiety. Like, it isn't getting better. Like, what is going on? Can we talk about ADHD? Is it possible for me? Do you think that's a thing? And we went through the like formal eval process, and I got on meds, and it's been really, really life changing for me.
Yeah. What was the formal like evaluation process like for you?
Thankfully, it was actually fairly informal for me, and I feel really lucky. The therapist I was working with at the time was a psychologist, and she used to do the formal evals for folks in like a prior life. And so she had experience with it, but also she had access to using the Brown scale for adults. And so she ordered the Brown scale, and we went over the entire scale for a session. And honestly, doing that session, going through that scale, that was my initial brain breaking of I'm not just high strung, I'm not just intense, I'm not just, all of these other things that I had been told or believed about myself. It's like, I have ADHD. That is going to break my brain for a little while.
Yeah, for sure. I follow this person on Instagram. I can't remember what her Instagram name is, but she talks a lot about the anxiety that ADHDers have about not passing the ADHD evaluation test, which is one of the reasons why I have yet to do it, is because I have this deep internal fear that I won't meet the criteria. And part of that for me comes from like childhood, which is I was a straight A student. I like never missed a class unless I was deathly ill. Like that was my life. And if I failed, I was a failure, period. And that's an ADHD experience. And I didn't know that. Like it's a very common thing. So it's interesting to hear like how supportive that was, because it does kind of make me think like, what would be the benefit, or would that be validating for me to do something like that too? Be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, my motivation, which you already know this, my motivation was entirely for my kiddo because I saw how much I wanted to be different and the best version of myself as a parent. And because I felt so powerless to do so, it really started me on this journey of, okay, I take this role really seriously. It's really important to me. I'm very motivated to change and to adapt and reframe and all of the things. And so when I went into it, I didn't even necessarily feel for certain that I had it. So I didn't even have the anxiety to know I might not pass.
Mm. It was more of
If
like
that
a
makes any
rule out.
sense.
It sounds like almost more of like a rule out
Yeah.
process for you rather than
Yes.
a confirmation process.
Correct. Yeah. Which is why, like, when I asked you the question of what was it like to be in the field and then not know you had it, I had to, like, really spend some time to process that personally because it was like, I've been in the field for this long. I know all these people that have it. I've worked a little bit with it, and I still would have never guessed I had it.
Yeah. I feel like I meet a lot of people like that. I recently met
Yeah.
a therapist here, and we were talking about doing photos for her new private practice. But as we were talking and I was telling her about my specialties in neurodivergence, she just kept talking and talking and talking. And I sat there. I think I actually voice memoed you about this
Yes.
at the end,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, how do you tell someone you just met who says that they're not ADHD, that they probably are?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know, like the experience for me, like I have less anxiety about it because I'm not going back and getting confirmation.
Mm.
I feel actually really humbled by the experience, and I think ultimately even like better informed to be able to support clients in that work because I very much understand what it feels like to think differently and never realize that you think differently.
I think it's so interesting how similar we are, but how different we are at the same time. Because I also feel like I have experienced these two kind of camps in client work too, where it's like the people who didn't know they thought differently. And then I was like, oh, you might be ADHD. And they're like, what? Like, and then have to do all this processing. But then there are people kind of in my camp where it's like, there is something that's not quite right. There is something that is happening in my body, and it's not, doesn't feel like anxiety because I'm not necessarily worrying, but it's, I don't know, like I'm forgetting my keys every day. I'm like, have to go back to check if the garage is closed 3 times before I can leave my neighborhood. Like, what is, like, why? Like, my husband's not doing that. My mom's not doing that. What is that? And so I think I see this so often, these kind of two routes to getting here.
Yeah, which is why I think I've become, as time has gone on, so passionate about working with neurodivergence because I want to help people catch it. Because I have felt the power of having it caught
Yeah.
and finally having that context and information for myself. And gosh, like I think about, I don't know if you go back at all, but I think about how much easier school would have been if I had known. I mean, like, by the grace of the maker did I get through a master's program
Yes.
without
Yeah.
having any knowledge that I had ADHD. I mean, the reason why I talk about I don't like reading is because it's really hard for me to focus. But before I had ADHD, I never would have said it's a focus issue. I just thought I was bad at it.
Oh, 100. Yes.
I just thought like, oh, I just can't focus because I'm just a terrible student and I'm a bad person and whatever messaging I had. And also, even if I could make myself read, I could not retain a blessed thing. And I'd have to read it over and over and over and over and over. And I
Yeah.
still couldn't get it. So it's a wonder I made it through school.
Yeah. Like, I know we've talked about the reading thing before. I am a reader, but I read out of interest, right? If I'm not necessarily like interested in it, I won't retain it. But it also is like this processing thing where, like, for me, fiction is so much easier to process because I get to kind of create it in my head a little bit. where like a therapy textbook, I can read a sentence over and over and over and over and over and not be able to spit it back out at you. And I think
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
the same thing with me where I was like, why can I not do this? Like, I know I'm not bad at reading necessarily, but like, why am I bad at reading? Because I was reading Pride and Prejudice in like fifth grade. Like, but it was because I was like really into history at that time. Like, that was one of my little special interests. And my mom was like, how are you reading this? But then you're struggling to read your like biology book. Like,
That is so, yeah, that's so valid because I think I had some of those experiences too, where I grew up and I typically had a really good vocabulary for my age. And it's not that I'm not literate. I mean, I feel like that's somewhat obvious, but I'm going to say that it's not a literacy issue.
no.
And also, too, is if I'm invested in reading something, I'm also a really fast reader.
Yeah.
And so I think coupled with all those things together, you would think in an ideal scenario, I would have no problems with focusing enough to read and retaining. However, that was just categorically not the case.
Right, right. I feel like so much about neurodivergence, and I think we know this at least from studies that I have been told about because I don't read studies. Who reads freaking studies?
Okay, I
Okay.
actually did last week, but that's a total tangent rabbit trail. We could talk about that another time.
You read something?
I did because it was super interesting. It's a new research study that came out about schizophrenia and like this really new wild breakthrough. But that's a totally different topic.
Pin.
Pin.
Put a
Okay.
pin. But what was I saying?
You don't typically read a lot of research articles.
Yes, but where was I going with that? Research tells us that neurodivergent individuals are interest and values driven, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
we get really into, and then we touch the focus thing where it's like we get hyper focused in on things that are like rooted in our values or our interests, right? Or they pique those values and those interests. ADHD is not a focused diagnosis.
Right.
It is a
Right.
values driven, interest driven, motivation thing, brain chemistry thing that just makes us a little different than the neurodominants.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's not I also had to kind of do a little bit of that unlearning too as I experienced the diagnosis of it's not that I can't focus, it's just I have trouble controlling the focus that I do have.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And the executive functioning. Executive functioning for me, that is probably one of my biggest struggles, more so than like focus things. Like I can hyper focus well, and I know how to set myself up for hyper focus. I also know how to set myself up for just regular focus, coping skills. But it's the executive functioning that is debilitating in this for me sometimes. And it's if I am out of a routine, it is debilitating. If I am in a routine, it is easy. Which then, like, in my brain, I'm like, do I have the tism? Maybe that's another discussion.
Pin, quick pin.
Another pin, rabbit hole bounce. But it is like laundry. Like, is the hard. Like, I have 2 hampers full of laundry right now. Like, you don't want to know what I'm wearing on the bottom half right now.
I do.
It's just shorts that do not match. But, like, I cannot bring myself to do it.
That's interesting. I have a very different experience in that I feel like the executive. Okay, let me back up a little bit. Which is, I don't know if you've gotten into the weeds about what type of ADHD you have.
Not
Are you
necessarily.
combined?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was diagnosed with combined type, and that typically my most present symptom is the restlessness. For me, it's physical and mental restlessness, but it's that hyperactivity piece. I notice for myself, I have a lot of executive function because of that like excessive restless energy that I have. The problem is that it's not a problem. It's a challenge. The challenge that the challenge that I can have is knowing when to stop myself and shut off all the executive function. Because if I don't create better boundaries for myself, I will burn out and I will get really, really like irritable and frustrated and emotional because I've just used it all. I've like completely overcompensated. I've taken on all the problems. I've tried to solve every single thing. I've created systems. I've da 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 da. And so I really like that is something that the medication really helps me do is be able to slow down and stop myself from losing too much of that energy and like creating that gauge. So it's very interesting because it's like executive function actually ends up not being my issue. It's like stopping myself becomes the issue. It's yeah, it's weird.
I think this is what makes us really good business partners. Is because right, like we kind of balance each other out in that where I'm like I'm just different in that than you are, and I think it works to our advantage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I know, I would say so. Like, I think the things that like you might get a little bit more overwhelmed by, I see it. I'm like, oh, easy. You just da 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 da, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. But I can't like focus on a thing for multiple hours. That's not
right.
Yeah,
like I could sit here and edit the whole podcast in like the next hour.
I could never. No, I won't be doing that. Right. I was going to say the other thing I noticed with meds, which is a kind of I don't hear people talk about this as much, is that I didn't realize how much of my feeling of being on edge without medication is because I feel like I'm going to forget something I need to do. And so that feeling of being on edge helps me remember all the things I need to do. But what happens is that I just run it over and over and over, and that creates a whole like level of anxiety and stress because I think I'm going to forget. I don't often do, but yeah.
That's one that I also have. Like, I think we are the same on that.
Of like, what am I forgetting? Like, I always feel like I'm forgetting something.
I think it manifests sometimes with like appointments too, where if I do a lot of photography in the evenings here because it's hot during the day and you don't want that. And so if I have a photo shoot at 5-6 p.m. on a Thursday when I don't see clients, I'm sitting here all day. Okay, do I have my batteries? Do I have my SD cards? Do I have all of this? Like, am I going to do anything? And then I can't I can't necessarily function as well throughout the day until that session is over. And then when I get home from that session, I'm like, all right, let's cook, let's clean, let's do all of this because now I've gotten that one thing done.
Right. Yeah. So, we haven't talked about this specifically, but concept of time is very different for people that are neurodivergent. And so there's a very common experience where if you have an appointment later in the day, you like can't do anything until that appointment. You have this kind of like holding pattern.
Or the opposite.
I don't necessarily have that. I have more what you're describing is I don't want to forget that appointment and when I need to leave and what I need to take with me. And so that plays in my head until I go do that thing. And because it's playing in my head, I don't have space for all the other stuff. And so all the other stuff feels more draining and taxing, and I can't feel fully present because I'm trying to remember all the things I need to do for X appointment over here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't have the holding pattern piece necessarily. I have the, like, my brain trying to take over and plan it.
Yeah.
Piece.
There's also the group of people, and I'm putting this out there for potential listeners maybe, that also, like, if they have something in the evening, they think that they can cram everything in until then, and maybe they can't, right? And if anyone out there is wondering, there is a term for this. This is called time apraxia, or like what people used to call time blindness, but we're calling time apraxia. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with clients because it's unique for everyone. But like you're saying, the perception of time, how we perceive and process time is very different.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I have a lot of family members that have ADHD, and they operate in that second camp where they're trying to like get all the things done and feel rushed before they go to something. But inevitably what happens is they are always late to the thing. And then I have the piece where I've been thinking about this thing the entire day. And so I am on time, if not a little bit early. And so the difference between us can get me a little frustrated sometimes. Like, I can't lie. I'll be like, you can't just be thinking about this the entire day. I don't understand why you can't just be thinking about this the entire day and be on time. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting as it shows up within relationships of people that have ADHD. And I bring that up because we find each other, right? ADHD people find each other, their friends, their partners, their family, because it's also super genetic. And so it's interesting to see how different people operate with time so drastically different with the same diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, it's like back to what I think you coined it last week, the like nadar.
Nadar.
Right?
Yes.
It 100% is that. And it's even more so of like I told somebody about nadar recently and they were like, you know what? It's more of like a magnet. And I was like, rather than like a radar. And I was like, that's interesting. And this person told me that they were like, when I meet someone else who is potentially neurodivergent, they kind of go through this subconscious like checklist in their brain that like, they're like, oh, yeah, you meet all this criteria too. Okay, welcome to my magnet group, right? Or like, you've been magnetized to me. And it just keeps happening. Like, everybody that I meet, I met someone that LJ like went to college with. LJ's my husband for everybody out there. And like, and I met one of his friends and I was like saying, I'm a neurodivergent therapist and all of this. And she was like, wait, tell me more. And I was like, okay. And now we've been friends ever since. And so it's like a magnet or a radar. Like we gravitate towards one another.
I like that idea of a magnet. However, when you were talking about it, what was playing through my mind was we do find each other and we tend to just like magnetize to each other. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of thinking about the inverse of this. I'm sure you can relate to this experience where it's like our neurodivergence also can be repellent.
Yes. In my head, I'm seeing like us in a bubble and like people who don't magnetize just like bounce off.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. So I've been thinking, when I talk about the idea of repellent, what it makes me think of is more specifically navigating social situations or like meeting new people or whatever the case may be. And when I don't have my therapist hat on, I'm casual, I'm easy breezy. I show up how I am. I don't sugarcoat things. I especially now really make an intentional effort around not masking.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I meet with people, I will just say a joke. I will just say the thing because I find that the people that don't get it or think it's funny or are off put by it, that's the repellent. It's like, yep. All right, like immediately. And the people that vibe with it or think it's funny or whatever the case may be, I'm like, oh, yep, you're my people.
Yeah.
So it's like, as much as it's a magnet, it's also like a repellent of like, you don't think that's funny? That shit was hilarious. Bye.
It's like the neurodivergent filter, like with building relationships and building community. Like if somebody doesn't vibe with my weirdness or looks at me weird when I stutter, I'm like, okay, you're probably not going to be in my inner circle. Like,
right. Yeah.
Oh man, I like the idea of repellent is a good one for sure. And I think the way to that neurodivergent therapy is going is towards that like not masking type stuff and more of that like affirming of our behaviors or our actions or our jokes or all those things rather than masking or behavior change. This is why I'm going to drop a hot take. I'm very anti-ABA in a lot of circumstances because of that, because I want autistic and ADHD individuals to be themselves, even though the world isn't necessarily made for us. We can still change that. We can make that change.
Yeah. I want to recognize too in that there is such a conversation happening in our field of how much do we support people in navigating a system not built for them, and how much do we advocate to change the system to work for people. Yeah. And when I've seen this conversation brought up, I see a lot of it being an either or. And ultimately, I think it's really a both and, which is that systems need to be better at accommodating and supporting and not giving you a weird side eye when you have to stim or do whatever.
Right.
And you, as the person, also need to feel like empowered and supported in being able to show up how you are.
Yeah.
And be comfortable with the idea that sometimes people aren't always going to get it.
100%.
Yeah.
On board. Snaps.
Yeah, yeah. But I use humor as repellent all the time. That's my this is what I found for myself as the fastest litmus test for somebody if they connect with me is my humor.
Yeah. Mine is probably my awkwardness, if I had to have like an equivalent to that, which sounds like kind of weird, but I am a very awkward person. Like, you have seen me in real life. Like, just, I'm awkward. I fall in a lot of situations. I don't think you've witnessed that yet. But like this, I've realized this with photography clients in particular, where if they're not vibing with my awkward behavior, like if almost 100% of the time at like a wedding consultation, I'll spill my drink on my shirt. And if they don't giggle with me about that, then like, well, maybe you're not the client for me. And like, that has oddly been my repellent, is like, how awkward am I, and is somebody accepting of that?
Yeah. I know, awkward I feel like has such a bad rap. Like, I don't even see that as awkward.
It's definitely not the right word. Like, I think awkward is negatively coded, but I don't know what else it is. I don't know why the word jiggly came to mind.
Okay, that's funny you said that, because the word that came to my mind was fumbling, which isn't like any better.
No.
Just a jingly little fumble. Why are we like this?
New merch
Why are we like this? Why can't we just go with like mysterious? Like, why can't we be cool and just say mysterious?
I don't think I'm that mysterious though. I'm pretty freaking obvious about the fact that I can't drink my water.
Yeah,
It's all over me.
that's fair. Yeah. This reminds me of when my kiddo, she recently had this experience where her feet fell asleep, and she hadn't had that happen before, right? And so, the tingles that you get. And I was like, oh yeah, it gets really tingly, And she's like, I cannot compute. Next time it happens, she cannot remember the word tingle. And she goes, my feet are very crumbly right now.
I love the word crumbly. Well, also, like, that is what it feels like.
Yes! Like, right when she said it, I was like, I'm not going to correct you. That is absolutely correct. Yes.
One of my favorite creators is Dad Chats. Have you ever seen Dad Chat videos?
Probably. I just can't place it right now.
Yeah, he's like a lawyer from Minnesota or something, and he does this series about kids should name everything, or why he thinks kids should name things. And he just basically says these things that his kids come up with every day, and they're just so magical, just like crumbly. It's like, yeah, like that's what it feels like. So yes, we're gonna use that. I'll have to like think of some of the other ones that he comes up with, but they're lovely, and it's like, yeah, they're so naive, and they're exploring the world in this new way that like they should be the ones naming things.
They probably should, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too good. Do you have anything more to say about ADHD? I feel exhausted talking about ADHD.
I do, although I could like talk about this for hours, and we probably want to wrap it up, because we could talk about it for hours and then exhaust ourselves and then not be able to survive for the rest of the day. So let's be kind to our executive functioning.
All right, what's your like rabbit trail thing for the day?
I don't know if I necessarily have anything this week, and maybe it's something for like a future episode, but I was watching a comedy special it was like Alana Glazer's comedy special. I was on an airplane, so I was watching it. And she mentioned something about like how we have a term for like daddy issues, but we don't have one for like mom issues necessarily, where like it's like daddy issues, right? Like you've got a thing. And in my head, I was like, yeah, we do. It's mama trauma. But then I said that a couple times over the last couple weeks, and people were like, I've never heard that before. And I was like, so I haven't stopped thinking about how that's not a thing. And now I want to make it a thing.
I'm not joking you. I used that last week because of you. I had never heard the term before you.
Right?
And I had it come up last week and I used it. I was like, oh, that's what my colleague calls mama trauma. Like I had to use it.
Like,
So I'll make it a thing.
did I coin this?
I mean, I've never heard it before, but that's not necessarily the most accurate depiction of whether it existed before or not.
I mean, that's true. But like this comedy special brought it up of like not having this term for mama trauma. And I was like, but that's mama trauma. And then I also said it to a client this week and they were like, I've never heard that before. That's a great way to say that. It's like, where did I get this? So,
I mean, I have heard people use every once in a while. It hasn't definitely not been frequent. Use like mommy issues, but I don't like it as much
no.
for some reason.
And you can't say like daddy trauma. It doesn't work. Like daddy issues and then you have mama trauma.
Yeah, daddy trauma sounds like something very different.
Yeah, let's not touch that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
that's fair.
That's what's been ruminating on my brain.
Okay, it's funny that you've had something ruminating because I've also had something ruminating.
Okay.
And it was also from something I saw on social media. Totally different. Okay. I would not be able to find the source inherently of where this idea came from. But is this person talking about this idea of spending a minute each day talking about something without using filler words. And if you use any filler words, you have to restart that minute.
That feels like a nightmare.
So initially, I was like, well, okay, you know, what does this like really do? And then it was talking a little bit about how, one, it normalizes people taking pauses and breaks to think of a word instead of filling that space.
Okay. I get it.
Here we go. Then the other evidence or like reason for doing it was that not only does it normalize having to take pauses and for you to have the time to process what you want to say, but it also adds more emphasis to the words that you do choose, and it makes you sound more, for lack of a better term, eloquent, because there's less filler words and it's one whole thought.
Makes sense. See, my initial thought when you said that was like, oh, no, because then I'm going to stumble and like that created anxiety where I was like, I'm not going to be able to think fast enough in order to do that. But then when you were like normalized pauses, I was like, I don't have to talk fast.
Right. So then I was thinking about it from a neurodivergent perspective because I got a lot of feedback that I talk really quickly. And I think part of that's just the neurodivergence and trying to get through a thought before I lose the thought.
Yay, forgetting.
Yay. But the other piece is because sometimes I have trouble focusing in conversations or I want people to like speed up or talk faster so that I can have an easier time to stay engaged. I think that's part of why, I mean, with absolutely no data to back this up, I feel like neurodivergent people probably use filler words more than neurotypical people because they don't like hearing the space from other people and they feel like they need to create something for that space between words.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Right. So that has been on my mind ever since of, So I've been casually practicing it here and there, not timing myself formally, but actually trying to do it, and it's a little bit easier than I initially thought it would be.
That's so interesting. Well, now I'm going to be thinking about that and
yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. Like how it came up was a content creator talking about how she was going to practice doing a minute every day and record that minute. And her initial minute of doing it was talking about the benefit of doing it and why and all that. I just thought it was really interesting. Yeah, I would have never thought about that before.
Well, the more we practice that, the less filler words maybe we'll use, and then the less that I have to edit for the podcast.
That was the other thought that came to mind was maybe if we both get better at it, we won't have to cut out so many likes and ums every single podcast.
To be fair, our last episode had way less than our first one. So we're getting better.
Oh, really? Wow. Look at us.
Yeah.
We're growing. Unintentionally.
Well, I think this is a good point to wrap up. Thank you all for listening
Yeah.
to our stories. Hopefully, we get to hear and share all of your stories in the comments. We love getting everybody's feedback. So please like, follow, comment, subscribe, do all the things.
And tell us about what maybe more unique thing about your ADHD made you realize that you had it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's hear from you guys. So thanks for listening to yet another episode on Are We ADHD? Duh.
We will see you in the next one, friends.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, or professional advice. Always consult a licensed professional for specific advice related to your situation.
And just a quick note to all you listeners. Yes, we're real therapists, but please remember this podcast isn't therapy. We're here to share ideas, have some laughs, and maybe make you think. Just maybe. But being a listener doesn't replace therapy. If you need mental health support, please see a licensed professional in your area. And if you're in crisis, call or text 988